Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we talk about the movie Grosse Pointe Blank, 1 minute at a time. I'm Dev.
And I'm Hugh, and on today's show we're going to be looking at minute 24. Martin Q. Blank, our protagonist, played by John Cusack, is in the middle of what will be an existential crisis as he stands in the middle of the Ultimart convenience store, which is located where his home used to be, and he has rung his shrink, Dr. Oatman, desperate for some help.
And joining us on today's show, and has been joining us this week, is Darren Husted. Darren, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, I mean, in the podcasting world, I've done a few podcasts. When Prince died, I was a huge Prince fan. I was heartbroken, obviously. So I decided I would do a podcast where I talked about every single one of his songs that he'd released. And considering that he's got 39 studio albums, that's, about 500 songs. And I managed to do that in 2 years.
Wow.
And then a week after I'd finished that podcast, I went to Paisley Park in Minneapolis, and saw where he recorded some of the songs that I talked about.
Have you talked about the story of the safe that was found in his house?
The safe? Are you talking about the vault?
Oh, the vault. Yes.
Oh, yeah, we know about the vault. Yeah.
I find that just incredible that this artist had, who was already incredibly prolific, had so much additional stuff that he had created that he just did not feel was good enough to.
I made it very clear when I started the podcast I would not be covering anything that came out of the vault. I was like,
that's fair.
I was like, I've got to round this off with the 39 studio albums he did while he was alive. If they keep releasing stuff, which they have done, they've kept releasing stuff. Mostly it's been expanded versions of his biggest selling albums. So Purple Rain, Sign of the Times, recently Diamonds and Pearls, which has got like a 7 CD, like £150 like set that's come out. But I was like, I'm not covering all those extra tracks that are on all those. And then there's also been like 3 albums of stuff that he'd recorded and then just put to one side. There was a whole album called Welcome to America that he did in like 2013 or something. Recorded a whole album, did a few music videos. It was all ready to go. He even had the tour called Welcome to America Tour, and then he just put it into the vault and was like, nah, I don't want to release it. And then he kept the tour name. It says Welcome. He just toured a completely different album. So I was like, no, I'm definitely 100% not covering anything that comes out from the vault. That's just, it's insanity. Like literally the amount of stuff he recorded, I would literally never finish that podcast. It would just be going forever. But I did a bonus thing at the end after I finished covering Prince. I did Stevie Wonder's albums in the 70s, the classics. That from 72 to 76 or 77.
Nice.
No, not 77. I stopped before Journey Through the Life of Plants. I got up to Songs in the Key of Life, and then I was like, that's it. I don't need to be doing Hotter Than July. I don't need to be going any further than that. Let's stick with the good stuff from the 70s, and let's just finish with that album.
I must admit, the one thing I would like to hear come out of the vaults is the. I remember sometime in the late 80s or early 90s, somebody talking about the fact that before he died, Miles Davis did a couple of club nights with him, with Prince on stage, and I'm a massive Miles Davis fan.
He didn't just do like some live stuff. They were in the studio at Paisley Park for like 6 months.
I'd heard the rumor, but
there's like there's a full album about like 15, 20 tracks apparently. Yeah.
So, but this is one of the great lost, missing things because of course, we all, those of us who are fans of Miles know how close he came to recording with Jimi Hendrix, and it all came down to money. And apparently, because it was Jimmy's manager trying to organize it, and apparently Miles was like, "Yeah, no, call me back when you've got the higher figure." And Jimmy was like, "Man, I'm fed up with that cat. We're done. Let's just do this album." And of course, Jimmy would die soon after, and it's like one of those great lost opportunities. It's one of those things I've always said. If you die and you wake up and you're like, you can hear there's certain people you should hear jamming together, right?
Yeah,
and that includes Jimmy and Miles, and now Prince. And if you're not hearing them, you're in the wrong place.
I think it was like 1988. They were like in the studio for like,
yep, something like that.
for about like on and off for about 6 months. And there was
Yeah,
rumor that they had like about it like a 12 or 13 track album ready to go.
I know.
And then
I
Prince was just
oh,
like, I'm not feeling
yeah,
this anymore.
yeah. Well, fair enough. That's his right. In an era of like fans going on and on about stuff, I feel like that was his right. It's his music. He was the creator. We don't get to say we own it. We get to enjoy it. We get to love it. We get to live it afterwards. But in the end, if he says, nope, it's not what I want out there, that's his choice.
Yeah.
But then, hey, look at the film business. Sometimes it's poor old Cusack still churning out films for Sony that are really, quite frankly, not the best of things, and certainly not making the best use of him as an actor. And I think that's a real shame. Because this was his first film as producer, Grosse Pointe Blank, and it this sets it's something of a template for his for his future productions that we know him for. But it should have been bigger, maybe. I mean, it's cult. Dev loves it to bits. I love it. It's cult. It's not runaway success. It's not Disney dragging it out and dusting it off for a 4K remaster like this year. Now, and that's sad because I think it deserves that.
I mean, as long as it doesn't become big enough that they just decide to do a complete recasting of it and just film it again. Because
well, that's the problem, isn't it? That's what they do with everything now.
Yep.
Sadly, so I wouldn't want to see a recasting of it. I don't think. In fact, what I'd like to see is, come on, we're getting freaking OAP action stars in Expendables and whatnot. Like, I'm pretty sure Cusack could do a perfectly reasonable, slightly hacked off Martin Q. Blank film now.
I mean, I could kind of see him in like the Hitman's Bodyguard kind of a role. Even.
Oh, completely. Yeah, exactly that kind of thing in the Sam Jackson role. Yeah, that's exactly it. Or if we really wanted it to be funny, right? He'd be in the Dr. Oatman role, and then it would be revealed that he's the ex-killer. That could be really, really interesting. And of course, that brings us back to our minute. Dr. Oatman, who we talked about in a previous episode, because it's the late, great Alan Arkin, one of the most wonderful voices and faces in Hollywood. Renowned from several classic eras of film, but to most of us these days, we've seen him pop up in all sorts of odd roles and films. He's endeared himself to a whole new generation of fans. And here he's nothing like the character as written in the script. It's almost like they just said, "Oh, we've cast Alan Arkin, so that's the character," basically. Dev?
Yes, absolutely. I find it interesting. So every so often we've referenced the kind of somewhat revised version of the script that was close to filming but not quite there, and the voicemail that Martin leaves is pretty much word for word. But in the original version, there's no Oatman in his office on the opposite end. It's just Martin leaving a voicemail.
Okay.
And I think that having Oatman there adds so much more to this call. Yeah. And obviously it never would have worked with Oatman as he was originally written, as we discussed a few weeks ago. But just watching Oatman reach out to pick up the phone, realize who it is, pull his hand back, turn around, walk back to the couch he was sleeping on, lie down on it, and then put a pillow over his head so that he just doesn't have to listen to it. It's possibly not what a therapist should do, but I'm not entirely sure any of us blame him for doing it.
Well, yeah. I mean, the other thing I thought was interesting is when we talked about the initial scene of him, and there's a sense of confrontation between the two, and then it turns out it's because he basically has been taken hostage for his appointment. Yep. One of the things I thought was interesting is that because Arkin is such a Bond villain-like presence insofar as, the severe wire-rimmed glasses and, the completely bald head and the very kind of brusque, almost mafiosi approach to his dialogue, the tension rests very much in, like, there's a point where, and I would love to know how they did it, where his vein is just standing out down his head, right? And like that's the sign to the camera that this guy is super stressed, but it's not coming out in how he speaks. And then when Martin leaves, he doesn't like rush to the door in a lesser comedy way. It would be like close the door and go, he just stands there and goes, yeah, go on, go enjoy yourself. And he's like, yeah, no, what is the joke Cusack makes about shooting something? He says,
I'll give it a shot.
I'll
Don't
give
no
it
no
a
no.
shot.
Don't give it a shot. Don't shoot
Don't shoot.
anybody.
Yeah, don't kill. Don't shoot anything. Don't kill anybody. And that's when you realize the sheer kind of volume of tension here. And so, like this scene now, I would not be surprised if they filmed this like immediately after the last scene. He's dressed the same way. It's the same set, but there is something about the way it feels like a logical follow on. As you say, he's just all of that tension just suddenly like compresses into I need to kill her on the sofa. It's absolutely hysterical. It's a brilliant punchline because it's basically the punchline to the earlier scene. But we've actually had all of this time getting away from the earlier scene.
Yeah.
Very clever editing.
The other day, I've been rewatching recently some David Mamet films, and I rewatched Glengarry Glen Ross. And in a film that is literally just like start to finish, like every single performance is great. And it's not a huge role for Alan Arkin in that film because obviously he's one of he's not Al Pacino, so he doesn't get to spend a lot of the film yelling and stuff. But I think he was some good color as to like one of the kind of the other salesmen who were basically kind of like getting annoyed that like Al Pacino's character Ricky Roma is the one who's getting all the decent leads, and it's like his frustration of being like I've got the same job as him. I'm trying to get stuff done. I'm trying to make sales, but everyone keeps like Ricky Roma keeps getting all the spotlight, and his like frustration and stuff. It's just a great performance. And it's weird because I think the last film that I saw him in at the cinema was over here. It's called Christmas with the Coopers, but elsewhere it's known as Love the Coopers, starring a young Timothy Chalamet. And his character in that film spends most of it trying to come onto the waitress, which I think is Amanda Seyfried. So she's like, I don't know, 50 years younger than him. It's a bit of a weird storyline, quite frankly, because he keeps imagining himself as a younger man so that he can justify coming on to Amanda Seyfried. And I'm like,
wow,
bit of a odd, and spoiler alert for Love the Coopers / Christmas with the Coopers. The film is narrated by Steve Martin, who it turns out is the voice of a dog. The family dog is narrating this Christmas story, which contains a lot of divorce and people getting arrested. And at one point, Anthony Mackie plays a gay cop who's in the closet, who arrests Marissa Tomei. It's, so that's two MCU people like, crossing over. It's just a whole lot of. It's a very strange film. By the end of it, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? But yeah, So that was the last time I like saw a performance of Alan Arkin's like on the big screen. If you don't count Minions: The Rise of Gru.
But we must count Minions.
Well, yeah.
I mean, we did not see Alan Arkin in that. We just
that's why I was saying. That's why I said Christmas with the Coopers. That was like the last.
Yes.
I mean, the last thing I saw him in was Spencer Confidential on Netflix, which was. As somebody who adored the original Spencer novels in the 70s and 80s, I kind of had to just put the books to one side and go, okay, this is nothing like them. Let me enjoy everyone who's in it for the film that it is. But again, it wasn't exactly a stretch for him.
What the hell is that film?
Spencer Confidential?
Never ever heard of it.
So
I remember Spencer. I remember Spencer for Hire.
Yeah, so basically, it's that. But the thing is that when the author died, as with a lot of properties, they brought in a whole bunch of ghostwriters to carry it on.
Yeah,
and that meant because of the age of the character, they had to basically a la Bond or something, or any other franchise, you have to do a reset basically. And so in
Okay.
the reset, he gets falsely imprisoned. Teacher becomes a legal expert in prison. Comes out, which is partially in the original character, right? But in the film version, it's a Mark Wahlberg film with Wahlberg as Spencer. So it's much more about I'm the ex cop who got sent down, and now I'm a ex con type of thing. And it's directed by Peter Berg, who
Oh
who
yes.
directed Wahlberg in Mile 22 and
Tons of other
got
stuff.
loads of films.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
basically, it's that kind of it's them doing an urban actioner. It passes the time. It's all right. Ilse Schlesinger, the stand up, plays his girlfriend, which is nothing like the character in the books. But hey, whatever. They're trying to kick off another franchise for Netflix, and I haven't seen or heard anybody say, "Oh yeah, there's going to be a second one." So I doubt it succeeded. But
Yeah. That
yeah,
is super weird that well, also got Winston Duke, of course, from
yeah. Oh,
Wakanda
he's
Forever.
amazing in it.
Yeah.
But then
And Bokeem
every
Woodbine,
version,
who's
yeah,
I always like, so
every version of Spencer there's been 3 TV versions of Spencer. There's the original TV series Spencer for Hire with Robert Urich, and that had Avery Brooks as Hawk. And they always get Hawk right because
yeah.
he's so freaking cool. And then in the TV movie versions with Robert Mantegna in the 90s, oh god, who did they get? I've forgotten who they got for Hawks, but every time Hawk is the guy they get right, and they never quite get Spencer right, which is hysterical. And Winston Duke he's Winston Duke, man. He's just so cool. Absolutely, he's the best thing in the film. And if for nothing else, you should just watch it for him being the dude that he is.
The funny thing is, like, obviously, being a huge Deep Space Nine fan and an Avery Brooks fan, who, if you've ever seen the Captain's documentary that William
Yes.
Shatner did, Avery Brooks
Yep.
is insane. He's unhinged. He's just like off the
Yep.
wall.
Yeah.
But I do
But I love
remember,
him.
like, even though it basically only ran for like 2 months, I do remember him having a spin-off of A Man Called Hawk, where
Yes,
he
which was
was,
also
yeah,
fun. I enjoyed that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't
It was
think I
basically
ever
the
saw any
80s.
episodes. But when Deep Space Nine started, it was like, oh yeah, and Avery Brooks, and it was because obviously,
Yeah.
basically nobody in that cast was super famous. Like they did, well,
Yeah.
nobody was Patrick Stewart famous. Let's put it like that, or you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
what's his face who does all the reading with the eyes and the Geordie LaForge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
like
but that was the thing.
yeah.
When he got cast in DS9, me and my friends, we spent like every season of the first 3 seasons going, when are they going to let him be like, be Hawk like? And then of course the moment he grew the beard, we were like, oh, he's coming.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, like
Lord, he's a coming.
as soon as he shaved his head and got the goatee, people were like, "Yes, this is
Yeah.
it. This is Avery. This is
This
why
is
you
it.
cast Avery Brooks because that's
This is why you cast Avery Brooks.
Yeah. So I
And
just
he,
remember talk of like A Man Called Hawk, but I never ever watched it. But I was
yeah,
just so that's the
it
only
was good
framing
fun.
that I had for it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was a one-man A team. Is basically what it was.
Okay.
So fun.
I mean, if you want to feel super old, Alan Arkin's son Adam is now the same age. Is now the same age that he was when Alan Arkin was in this film. So.
Oh God. Okay, now
Wow.
I feel old.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So if you were to do this film today, Adam Arkin could play the role of the psychiatrist because he's the same age as Dad
God,
was.
that's depressing. That's really depressing. Oh, thank you for that.
Well,
Dan.
I just
Really,
thought
just what we needed.
I just thought I'd make you feel super old for a moment there. But yeah, no, I mean,
Fantastic.
who doesn't love Alan Arkin? He's great. I mean, Sunshine Cleaning is a great film that he's, I think it's funny because obviously he did Little Miss Sunshine, and then after that, there's like a series of films where he kind of basically played the same role in like a 3 or 4 films after that, where he was like a grumpy grandpa who's kind of like so it's really weird because he much like all the all the old guys in the Expendables, like he got kind of typecast in a weird way where he was playing roughly the same character in like Marley and Me and Argo and Incredible Burt Wonderstone. Like it's the same kind of like slightly grumpy older man. You know, but he's really good, and I do like the fact that like. Well, you mentioned the script, and you sent me a copy, and in it, like in the original script, obviously there's a lot of mentions of 7-Eleven, Ultimart, but the funny thing is, it was like in the original script, it's meant to be a payphone that he's calling from, but obviously because time has moved on, rather than have him go to a payphone, he's just standing there in right next to all the fridges, which look like mini fridges next to the gigantic frame of John Cusack, and he's just making the call on a cell phone. So that's like a noticeable change. Like you say, like
Yeah,
the dialogue isn't a huge change, but like that's just one thing that makes the scene slightly different because he gets to say, "I'm standing in what should be my living room," and But I also like the detail that they've got, like obviously they got like a load of beers in the fridge and stuff like that, and obviously we talked about the layout of this in the previous minute, but I like that they've put we ID Michigan. You can see that, so obviously like they're saying that they need like Michigan ID, but also that fridge is filled with Faygo,
yeah,
which
which
again
I
is
didn't even realize was a real soda company until
yeah,
I
Oh,
watched
is
it.
it?
yeah, it is,
Yeah, I've
yeah,
never seen that.
but it's
Oh,
specifically
wow.
associated with Michigan.
Yeah.
So that's like a great detail because somebody's obviously like, well, if we've got to fill these fridges up, what can we get that's cheap, that's not like Pepsi or Coke, that like is something that would
Right.
identify it as being Michigan, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Faygo is a perfectly, that's just a nice little detail. Someone obviously knew what they were doing. Like I said,
And this
the Red
is
Wings hat in the previous minute like made me believe we were in Detroit, but now they've got Faygo in there. It's completely selling
that
it.
really sells it, and the Stroll poster in the back as
Ah.
well. Stroh's beer in the
Yeah.
background. But one thing that I find interesting is like this is from a time before product placement was pervasive, right? Like I'm sure there were product placement in movies at this time,
Yeah.
Well,
but
I
it's
mean,
not to the extent
Wayne's
where
World
it
was like what
precludes the
90.
inclusion of the brands.
Wayne's World was like
97.
92.
Oh yeah, right,
Yeah. So
right.
and they'd already commented on kind of
Made the
explicit
joke.
product placement as a joke. So yeah, it was. But
Mm-hmm.
like aside, unless you're funding a Bond movie and you need him to constantly look at a very expensive watch every 5 minutes so that we can see the
Right.
branding. Yeah. But I mean, I don't mind product placement because the thing is, having this called an Ultimart kind of throws you a little bit more out than it just being a 7-Eleven. If it's a 7-Eleven, you don't notice it. But the
Yeah.
fact that it's a fake brand, that always kind of throws me off. And
Right.
I mean, I love Law and Order, and obviously it's many spin-offs. But the fact that every single search engine they have on screen is like a brand new fake search engine. Like there are websites that are dedicated to tracking all of the fake websites that they use
Yeah.
on Law and Order,
Yeah.
and it always like there was an episode a few years ago where this guy is meant to be like a billionaire, and he's a head of like a tech company, and the tech company is effectively Uber, but obviously they can't say Uber because you can't have
Yeah.
like the head of Uber be
Yep.
like a serial rapist or something. So they came up with a completely fake brand for like a taxi app, and then everybody in the episode is meant to pretend like, oh yeah, we've been using it for years and it's really big, and then the next episode nobody's ever going to mention it again, and it just completely takes you out of like the entire experience. So I like that they put some Fago back there because that does make it seem a bit more like
Yeah.
genuinely you're in Michigan.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Faygo. There's Volvic. There's Miller Lite. It makes it feel more real than having cups and containers that are placed in such a way that you can never actually see the branding on them because the company didn't pony up
Yeah.
to have their product placement.
A suspiciously shaped bottle that you definitely know is meant to be Coke, but it's always pointed with the logo away from camera, so you can never really
Yeah,
confirm it.
the Formula One Marlboro barcode, right?
Mm.
Or if you've got like a vending machine and it just says drinks on the side, and it's like I've never seen like literally ever like a machine that is full of cans that doesn't at least have some kind of logo of one of those cans on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Very much so. I'll give for all the things I over the years have decided I don't like about Tarantino's way of doing things. One of the things I do think is clever and funny was his creation of a whole set of brands that are within his universes.
Yeah,
And the way you could go through the first 3 or 4 films and the branding is clear, that the cigarettes, who's smoking what cigarettes and who's drinking what burger joints, and I thought that was kind of fun because actually it just made it a lot easier. Although, of course, if you know your Morley cigarettes, you know your fake brand, that's one of the classic prop cigarettes in Hollywood. Something like 60 years, I think it's been. Yeah, 60 years. Morley cigarettes have been used in films, television shows, and video games.
There's
And
also
of course,
Let's.
yeah,
Yeah. Which was
most
mostly made famous in Community, because on that there's
yeah.
they actually
Community?
kind of place it so that people are like, get your hands off my Let's, and it's like
Yeah,
becomes like a
so
whole
funny.
in-universe kind of branding thing. It's very, very funny.
Yeah, but that everything about Community doing that, I mean, they did that so well. It was just the best thing about that show. Was just the way they just played with every possible aspect of filmmaking and TV, and I loved it. I love that show. Right. So, Dev, where are we at with our wonderful Dr. Oatman? I feel like we've talked about him and not enough about what's being recorded on his voicemail.
I mean, we can talk about this. I've quoted it, I think, at least 3 times in the show so far.
Yeah, but like, do you know what is it? It's telling us about Martin, right? Because in the last couple of episodes, we've been focused on Martin's psychology.
Yeah,
We've
absolutely.
been focusing on Oatman's reaction here.
Yes, and this is probably the most vulnerable we see Martin Blank in his conversations with Oatman, right? This is where he's actually reaching out to somebody because he needs help. And it's Oatman that he's reaching out to, which is kind of interesting. And the fact that Oatman doesn't answer, obviously, is pretty telling on Oatman's part. But it gives us an opportunity to relate to Martin Blank in a way that I don't think we normally do. Generally speaking, he's very calm. He's very composed. He's frequently doing things that, let's face it, most of us don't do. And in this situation, he's just gone back to what he was expecting to be his house, to probably quite an awkward conversation with his mother, who it seems like he hasn't spoken to in probably 10 years or something close to it. And instead he's in a store, and he's trying to think who he can reach out to. And his first choice is Oatman, and that goes nowhere. And his second choice is Marcella, right? And with Marcella, it's obviously a very different relationship. He's not asking for advice, he's giving instruction, which takes us to what will be the next minute, really. And we see one quick glimpse of it at the end of this minute as he walks towards a woman sat on a sofa in what's clearly a care facility or a retirement community. I feel like it's more likely a care facility in this, especially given the conversations that happen. But the other thing that we see a very brief glimpse of in this minute are 2 characters that, Hugh, you and I have already seen in this film.
Oh, yes.
Darren has joined us after the introduction of these 2 characters, and one of them in particular is quite a well-known name for those of us that have watched TV in the last 30, 40 years, which is the 2 federal agents that seem to be following Martin Blank, and we know that have been set on Martin by our other friend, Mr. Grosse. So this is the 2 federal agents. I can't remember their names off the top of my head, which is killing me.
That's okay, because we don't know yet, really.
I was going to say, do we know what agency they work for at this point, or what their names are? Like, I don't think any of that information's come out yet, has it?
Yeah.
We don't know their names. We get their names from Marcella later on in the film.
Yeah.
We do know. We've got a pretty clear idea that they're.
Stephen Lardner and Kenneth McCullers are the characters, but
that's right.
What we're more likely to recognise as film goers when we saw it originally is the actors.
Yes. Yes, but in the first scene that we saw them in, which was last week, we get an introduction to them as everybody's driving into Grosse Pointe. and they kind of go through like their history and reading the file, and we also
Mm-hmm.
know that Grocer is the one that set them on
Mm-hmm.
Martin. But yeah, the big thing here, obviously, is that it's K. Todd Freeman and Hank Azaria
Yeah,
that are
absolutely.
in this. So
Cementing the connection we were talking about in a previous episode with The Simpsons, where we were talking about the Quickie Mart versus the Ultimate. It all just seems to be, it's all circling around the same things, right? It's all coming together. Kind of crazy.
I mean, you say The Simpsons, but to me, Hank Azaria, like I don't think like The Simpsons was the first time that I like saw him. I'm almost certain there was some other. Am I going crazy? Was he not on? I think Herman's Head is probably where I remember him from. Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, which also had Thingamajig who plays Lisa. She's only been doing it for 30-something years. Yardley Smith. It also had Yardley Smith on.
yes.
Um, and Jane Sibbett, who later went on to appear in Friends. And Molly Hagan, who appeared on, I think, a couple of episodes of Deep Space Nine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Hank Azaria has quite a storied past. He was in Pretty Woman as a detective. He cameos in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in 1990. So, I mean, he's in Tales from the Crypt in an episode.
Yep.
Has been in a huge number of things. Obviously, he was Animal in Godzilla, the what I think of as the American Godzilla, because I know there have been a million different Godzillas, both Japanese and American, but the one that I remember, he's pretty prominent in that as well.
I mean,
weird.
When I saw him in Heat, I was like, "Oh, that's that guy from Herman's Head."
Okay.
I don't think I was like, "That's the guy from The Simpsons," because I'm not sure at that point.
No, we didn't. Yeah, we didn't know who. But I did know. I knew him from Quiz Show. Because Quiz Show had one hell of a cast. There's a film people don't talk about a lot anymore, but it was a cracking movie. Real proper like grown up drama that I remember seeing in a packed cinema. I can't imagine that kind of film packing out cinema these days. And every little part in it is perfectly cast, and he's one of them. But then, Heat was probably the next time I think I saw him, and then Grosse Pointe Blank.
I mean, obviously,
and then after that,
the Birdcage, he managed to do a chance to put on a voice, which is obviously something that he has been doing for the last 30-something years. So I think that attracted people's attention, because I don't think his character is the same as what Hank Azaria is. Like, isn't he? I don't know. He's meant to be some kind of nationality that Hank Azaria definitely is not. As a number of voices, on The Simpsons were.
Yes. Somewhat controversially.
I like the fact that by the time he gets, so fast forward from 97 and Grosse Pointe Blank, by the time he gets to 2004, I remember seeing Dodgeball in the cinema and everyone going, yay, when he turns up as young Patches. You know what I mean? It's like he got to that point now, without having, a major leading role in terms of his own face.
I mean, I was one of the few people who actually saw Mystery Men in the cinema.
Oh,
so I remember seeing him in that, and obviously by that point I knew who Hank Azaria was, and so like having him do this weird, like putting on this weird like British voice as like a character, and then obviously people not understanding why he was called the Blue Roger, and just like the constant explanations of exactly who his character was meant to be. That was
good film.
But I was going to say, and obviously other than like the Simpsons movie, I'm trying to think what else I saw him in. I remember him being quite funny in Love and Other Drugs, where he like plays this doctor who starts prescribing Viagra, and then Jake Gyllenhaal keeps hooking him up with all these like women. He's like cheating on his wife, and it's just like a really weird, like sleazy doctor role that he plays in that.
I think Friends is one of the first things I remember.
Oh, of course, yeah. People loved him as David, the guy who has to go to Russia for some reason and can't come back. Like that first episode has got very, very vague in exactly what's going on with his life, that he has to vanish, and obviously then he does turn up at the wrong time, because then obviously Paul Rudd is fighting for the affections of Phoebe, and he doesn't really stand a chance against Paul Rudd. Ageless Paul Rudd looks the same as he did now in Clueless. It's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, aside from the various controversies, let's say, that Hank Azaria has been involved with, he's always an enjoyable actor, and the characters that he can play without attracting controversy, let's say, like Chief Wiggum and Mo, and Professor Frank, kind of like he's the one who came up with the word Glaven, because he was just like coming up with the voice, and he was obviously trying to do that kind of Jerry Lewis voice, and then he started saying some nonsense words, and the writers were kind of entertained by the fact that he said the word Glaven, because they didn't. They're like, what does that mean? He's like, I don't know what it means. It's just like a weird thing that this type of character would say. So like, it sounds vaguely scientific. So that just became. I mean, in the 22 short films about Springfield, like when he just turns up at the end and he's missed his chance to have a story, and he says, the monkeys and the pulling, and like just his kind of the delivery of that, obviously why he's, I don't know, making 30 million a year, sitting at home in a voice booth doing a bunch of Simpsons episodes every year. He's a talented voice actor. But I do kind of like how, I don't know, like he looks like so disheveled, especially compared to like Martin Blank, who is very stylish and dressed all in black and wears the shades. And then you've got the two like government workers, and they basically look like they've put the suits on in the dark. Like it's just like a very clever like contrast between like somebody who's making money to like kill people, and government agents who are they're making government money and they can't really afford like fancy suits or anything like that. So they constantly look throughout the whole film slightly disheveled and poor. Which again,
I mean, you see
it's
McCullers cleaning his teeth at one point, right? Like he's actually brushing his teeth in the car.
yeah.
Like they're sleeping in the car as they're traveling around. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a nice detail that these like the contract killers are the ones who are all dressed really well, and the government guys are all like sweaty and disheveled and wearing badly fitting suits, and just looking completely out of it. It's a nice little detail that whoever the costume designer was obviously managed to fit in.
Okay, so shall we call it there? Let's do
Do it.
All right, this was minute 24 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, Dev Soligar and myself, Hugh David.
Today's guest was Darren Husted. You can find Darren at various places. Search for Darren Husted, that's Husted, in your podcast catcher, and you'll find so many Movies by Minute podcasts that Darren's been involved in. Meanwhile, you can find us on various podcast players, as well as YouTube, Twitter, aka X, and Spotify. Look for at Debi Radio, that's DEBI Radio, and on our website, debiradio.com, DEBI Radio.
Fantastic. And if you want to have a chat with us, check out the listeners group on Facebook. It's called Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. So once again, one last time, DEBI Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling.